Assalamu alaikum rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And good evening to those people of other faiths. Welcome to Deal or No Deal. And I say that with a bit of a wry smile. As you know, we were due for a phenomenal debate which was going to feature some of the best racists around and the people perhaps with the strongest views going. So we were going to have Stephen Lennon, also known as Tommy Robinson. We're going to have Paul Golding, Anne-Marie Waters. We still got our crusader, Reverend Frank Gelli. We've got a Greek guy called Hamza Tzortzis and some guy on the left called Abdullah Andalusi. Sounds like a restaurant. Okay. So, brothers and sisters and esteemed guests, it is a real pleasure and honor to be here. And I thank you on behalf of iERA for having me chair this debate. Sadly, and you probably know what I'm going to say now, the most controversial characters, also known as Stephen Lennon, Paul Golding and Anne-Marie Waters, have all backed out. So how do we feel about that? Oh, okay, so let me read out some statements. This is from Tommy Robinson. I will not do it in an Essex accent. As has previously occurred when I was invited to debate about the Rotherham grooming scandal, blah, 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 I have been called in to see the probation services and informed if I attend tonight's debate, then I will be recalled to prison. So unfortunately, I am unable to attend this debate. The police and council systematically abuse their powers by getting the venues cancelled. Well, that is correct, because this is the third venue that we had to try and host this event at. The previous two had been intimidated into not allowing this debate to go ahead. That's freedom for you. Okay, so the time for suppressing subjects related to Islam has gone. The government, police and council should actively be facilitating these events to avoid further problems and open and public discourse. By halting debate between the parties involved, they are causing further problems as people need to be able to air their views and hold an amicable debate on these views. People that would be more than happy to attend these debates and listen to the views of all parties are being pushed to participate in street demos as the only legal move left. When I am off license on the 23rd of July, I will arrange to participate in these debates or similar ones. Well, thank you very much, Tommy. So 23rd of July, let's give him a clap. It's lovely that, it's a beautiful piece of prose and the spelling is correct as well. That's wonderful. Okay, and we have Paul Golding, as you know, who's the head of Britain First. He really was not able to give any response or a statement. We just think that he's probably found another mosque to go and violate somewhere up and down the country. And then Anne-Marie Waters. Well, Anne-Marie Waters was here. She did turn up, and to her credit, a brave young lady. She brought her entourage as well. However, as she saw that Paul Golding and what's his name? Is it Steve? Is it Tommy? Tommy Robinson. As they had backed out, she was a bit scared. She was a bit worried that she was going against the likes of Hamza, Abdullah, and the Reverend here. And it seems that perhaps her views may be a little bit too weak for her to try and push and justify, so she did back out. I personally think she found the host devastatingly attractive and was worried that she may have to convert to Islam by the end of the evening in order to marry me. I like the latter, yes? Yes, I think we like the latter version of that. Thank you very much. So people, what do we do? Well, we decided that, if there are any racists in the audience, put your hands up? No? Okay, self-hating Muslims? Thank you. Okay, so clearly that we've exhausted that option. So tonight I am going to become a self-hating Muslim. And we're going to continue with the debate. If that works with you, are you okay with that? Shall we continue with the debate? A bit more enthusiasm would be nice, so we know it's hot. Yes? Yay! Okay, good, excellent. So I am going to play the role of self-hating Muslim. I'm going to ask some difficult questions of these bearded fellows and of the Italian crusader there in the corner. And we're still going to be discussing the topic of Islam and British values. Do they work? However, I had some rules, and I'm not sure really whether these apply. However, I will, as chair, just clarify these. So all speakers, you must listen to me, okay? I am the daddy, right? And you will respect that. I will be fair and respectful with all of you, as long as you are the same with myself, and I'll give you a reasonable time to speak and respond to questions. It is my right to challenge and interject to bring others into this discussion where I feel it's perhaps a bit weighted on one side. You must be polite and not abusive or crude language. However, you can obviously challenge each other's opinions or my opinion should you need to. You must stay here for the remainder of the discussion. So you, Hamza, no running out like you may feel at some point because you're just too hot under the collar. Audience members, please be respectful. No shouting, no interrupting, no abusing me. I don't deserve it. The speakers and the abuse of them will also not be tolerated, and you will be removed by external security. So any of the big bald guys that are peppering this venue, oh, he's got hair, they will eject you very, very quickly. So are we good with that? Yes? Okay, yes? Yes? Brilliant. Okay, let's start. And please, at any point, I will come to the audience, and if you wish to ask a difficult or challenging question, please feel free. Just put your hand up, and I will come to you. Okay, Fadl. Bismillah. Okay, let's go to Hamza. Hamza, great to have you here.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So Hamza, Islam and British values. There's a huge debate around it, and there's a lot of discussion, especially with the amount of legislation which is coming out around it, the CTS bill, the Trojan horse scandal as well. Everything really is centered around whether there can be a coexistence of Islam and British values. What do you understand by British values?
It's a very good question. I think the way to answer that is to say, really, that why is it the Tory government and other governments, why do you think they have the right and they could arrogate to themselves the kind of divine authority to tell maybe 60 or 70 million people what they should value? Now, I'm not saying that in a kind of, oh, look, he's being ideological. I'm saying it from the perspective of if, as per the British value list, this country is supposed to be democratic, then why don't you ask the British public what you value? So when there have been some academic and social studies on the topic, yes, there is some things like being polite and tolerance, and we all agree with these words. But I think the discussion should be this. It's not just about words, because words are vehicles to meaning. For example, tolerance to me could be intolerance for you. For example, we may believe in tolerance, but I may tolerate all religions and none, but you'd be like, nah, Scientology, not for me, mate. Satanism, not for me. So the point is, where do we draw the line and where? We should not have this kind of binary, quantitative approach to these things. We should have a qualitative approach, meaning, okay, you said tolerance. So Abdullah, what do you mean by tolerance, sir? What do you mean by justice? Reverend, what do you mean by loving your neighbor? What does that mean for you? And this is a national conversation. So what I would say is, we must have a national conversation.
So a question I have is, why shouldn't the government feel free to discuss the issue of values? Because they are elected by the people.
Yes.
It's up to them to define what works in this country, what doesn't. What gives you the right to feel that it's unacceptable for that discussion to take place?
You should take my statements as a helpful suggestion, because I think just saying these are our values doesn't really bring people together. Because if, as Theresa May said, we're here to bring people together, if that's the case, and let's just take her as, being an honest person, she wants to bring people together, fair enough. If that's true, then why just throw these words out there? What does it mean? What does democracy mean? I mean, ask the normal guy on the street, you wouldn't have a clue what democracy means, right? Because if we had a true democracy, we would have the Anne-Maries of the world, we'd have about 80 MPs from UKIP. Do you know that? If it was a true representation. But we don't. We have a different type of representation in this country. So the point here is, we need to have a national conversation. What's wrong with that? As a Brit, I was born in this country. I love this country. I love the people. I want to be good to the people. I want to articulate a compassionate, intelligent view for my own values to the wider nation. And I believe in tolerance. And therefore, why can't within that value of tolerance discuss what it means to believe in democracy, to believe in individual liberty, to believe in tolerance of other faiths and none, and to believe in the rule of law. Because we all have our own conceptions of these things. No one disagrees with the rule of law, for God's sake. Who's an anarchist in this room? Anyone? Way, stand up. What's your name, sir?
I'm Thomas Jones.
You're an anarchist.
I'm a minarchist.
So what does that mean? Sorry, apologies.
It means I advocate night watchman state, which is that it's a centralised government that is responsible only for emergency services and the enforcing of the non-aggression agreement.
But do you believe in the rule of law?
To an extent, yeah.
Okay, fair enough. See?
So you're part of the Night's Watch. That sounds like something out of Games of Thrones.
It is, yeah.
I'm Jon Snow.
I haven't been north of the wall.
So so the gentleman here, he is an example of what I'm saying. He has his own conception of what it means to have a rule of law and what's democracy.
Okay.
So
great.
he agrees with the words,
Hamza,
but
thank
words
you.
are vehicles to meaning.
Hamza, thank you very much. You have spoken. You've spoken eloquently. Reverend, what is your understanding of British values? How would you define them?
Assalamu alaikum. May I speak to you in the name of the one true God? I want to start with a quotation from George Orwell, famous English writer, intellectual, and he wrote, English people consider themselves superior to foreigners. George Orwell said, now, a superior people must have superior values, stands to reason. So what are these values? Well, David Cameron mentioned freedom and tolerance. You know, I remember when George W. Bush spoke of a freedom-loving people, the great playwright Harold Pinter said, quipped, I've never come across a freedom-hating people. There are no peoples who prefer slavery to freedom. So, and foreigners may love liberty as well. There is nothing particularly unique about this putative love of freedom, which is English. As to tolerance, like freedom, it has limits. Our culture, our society does not tolerate racism, pedophilia, polygamy, or homophobia. Those are values which are not tolerated. You know, the apostle of tolerance in English history was the philosopher John Locke. And John Locke wrote an epistle on tolerance. And yes, everybody was included, but not Roman Catholics and atheists. They were not included in tolerance because they were beyond the pale. They could not be trusted to keep their word, blah, blah, blah. So it is nonsense that tolerance is an absolute value. Gender equality, that was mentioned by Nick Clegg. Well, consider the English public school system. There are schools which are only for one gender, one sex. So if there is a parent who wants to send his daughter to one of the schools, you can say, but wait a minute, you're violating gender equality. But the man may say, I'm free to do what I want, to have the money and pay for my daughter. And I'm illustrating this point to bring out the fact that freedom and equality actually conflict. There are two values which are not actually, you cannot hold them together. Democracy, okay, Hamza actually, very interesting, mentioned the case of UKIP. Now, none of you is going to warm up to the UKIP, obviously, but still, they got nearly 4 million votes and only one MP. Democracy my foot, quite clearly, you know, it doesn't work. The rule of law, impeccable principle. Who would want to live in a lawless society? But what about unjust or iniquitous laws? You know, there's an expression, the law is an ass. Today, we already have moves to legalize euthanasia. Baroness Warnock, distinguished moral philosopher and member of the House of Lords, she has advocated that people who suffer from Alzheimer's should have a duty to die. A duty to die. So those are all laws which to many of us would be regarded as intolerable, unjust, and not to be approved or underwritten. And indeed, the Catholic Church already regards abortion as murder. So, God. God doesn't come into the British values. Bizarre, isn't it? He's never mentioned in these lists. Religious never mentioned. It's funny because the monarch is actually the supreme governor of the national church, the Anglican church. And there are 26 bishops who sit by law in the House of Lords. They are the Lord's spiritual. I don't think they mean very much whether they're.
Reverend, thank you very much. Sorry to cut you off short, but we need to go to Abdullah Al-Andalusi. We have a lot to talk about, so you'll have the opportunity. Abdullah.
British values. There's a hidden problem in this topic, and it's due to the fact that it's based on political rhetoric. You see, the thing is that if we are made to use the phrase British values, we have inadvertently accepted a phrase which was designed to actually have power over us by being the defining criteria. So if we are also hung up about being compatible with British values, suddenly we give that phrase power, and then we give those who have the loudest voice to define it power over us. And that's the problem. Never in English history or British history did we ever see a discussion about forcing British values on, well, at least not on Britain, maybe elsewhere around the world, but at least not on Britain. And when we did hear in Europe discussions about national values, we saw it in fascist countries, where suddenly now the state defined what the values of the people were going to be, and anyone that fell foul of those values were a problem to that country. And unfortunately, it was seen that Europe hasn't really learned much from its history. So just break down some of the points, and I think my colleagues have already said a lot of what I wanted to say was quite good. But just look at, for example, the claim to individual liberty. The claim that we have to promote individual liberty, yet the ruling party wants to clamp down on what they call divisive speech. Divisive. So everyone should be individuals, but you can't be divided. I mean, being individuals already means you're divided. If you mean we must be one collective society, then that's not conducive to individual liberty. They say we support tolerance, and yet they're not tolerant against many Muslim charities, schools, peaceful political and evangelical organizations, or expressions or cultural practices they deem to be illiberal, both Muslim and even Christian. The rule of law, which is quite ironic coming from a party that wants to get rid of the Human Rights Act, and accountability to the rule of law. It's easy to say rule of law when you make the laws. What about democracy? Well, I think the Greeks will have a lot to say about that, no offense. The Greeks wouldn't consider any country in the world currently, apart from maybe Switzerland, to be democratic. Democracy means literally the people rule. The people vote the laws in, and they decide the policies by voting, referendums, if you will, on everything. Right? But in the Europe after these revolutions and so on, they adopted a republican system, and then around about the 19th century, they rebranded it as democracy to make people feel that they had some say in power. That's why you see all these quotes from American founding fathers and Enlightenment thinkers like Edmund Burke who refute democracy. And you think, well, how come these are all refuting democracy and yet we call our states democratic? Because they threw out democracy as a system. They can't trust the people to rule themselves. No. But we should adopt a republican system where people will vote for representatives which will then enact policies. Of course, the biggest issue was protection of property and guaranteeing that the rich in that society are not overthrown by the majority. And this is why they decide to rename themselves the democracy, to make you think that you have some power and the rich will keep getting richer at your expense. And just a last point, and I also think it's quite silly to say British values. What makes British values both British and values? And if they have legality or power purely because they are British, then one could say that liberal evangelist Raif Badawi, who's being lashed in Saudi, is contradicting Saudi values. And Saudi Arabia is just imposing its values. And if you don't like the Saudi values, then you can leave the country. Why won't people accept that? It's because it's unjust.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Let me put a context behind the speakers now. You've heard what they have to say. Let's give them a bit of a background. So Reverend Frank Gelli, who is clearly the one at the end, is an Anglican priest and a writer and cultural critic. He grew up in Rome, where he read sociology and worked as a freelance journalist. He holds degrees in philosophy, theology, education, and Islamic studies from London and Oxford universities. Ordained into the Church of England in '86, he served in London parishes as well as a chaplain at the British Embassy, Ankara, Turkey. Religious dialogue is one of his major commitments. He is often interviewed by various Islamic channels and programs. His latest book, The Dark Side of England, is published by Amazon Kindle. Hamza Tzortzis, on my right, is an international public speaker, writer, instructor and researcher. He focuses on Islam, Western philosophy and Islamic thought. Hamza delivers workshops, seminars and courses on the foundations of Islamic thought. He is the head of education and research at the Islamic Education and Research Academy. Hamza has spoken and delivered workshops at universities, colleges, and made numerous appearances on various TV channels, including BBC Newsnight, BBC The Big Questions, BBC Radio 4, Press TV, Islam Channel, and numerous others internationally. And finally, Abdullah Al-Andalusi is an international speaker, thinker, intellectual, and Muslim activist. His work involves explaining and demonstrating by rational argument the intellectual proofs from the Islamic belief system and promoting the Islamic way of life and solutions for contemporary problems. Abdullah has spoken in universities, colleges, and made numerous appearances on various TV channels, including BBC ITV, BBC Arabic, BBC Radio 4, Al Jazeera Press TV. He was also engaged in a number of debates with atheists, secularists, agnostics, liberals, and Christians on a variety of topics from theology to political philosophy. He co-founded the Public Discussion Forum, the Muslim Debate Initiative, that promotes open dialogue and critical debate between thinkers, academics, politicians, and public speakers of all backgrounds. What I'd like to do is, based upon the opening statements, I would like to turn to the audience for any one of you who would like to ask a first question. Who would like to ask a first question? Put your hands up. Don't be nervous. Yeah, please stand up. Wonderful. Just tell us your name, where you're from,
Robbie
and your
from
question.
Gospel, near Portsmouth.
Portsmouth, wonderful. Who's your question director, sir?
Basically anyone. What do you quantify as a British Muslim?
That's a very, very good question. Let's ask Abdullah. Abdullah, what is a British Muslim?
Well, a British Muslim is a Muslim that lives in Britain. I know it sounds so obvious to say that. Not the most complicated of responses, but basically, what makes anyone part of a country or a land that they, what does it mean to say that you originate from a place? And what I would say is that what makes you originate from a place or belongs to a place is you speak the language, you adopt a lot of the modes of communication which we call culture, so how to express yourself, how to insult, how to show respect. These are cultural aspects. So once you believe this, you adopted these basic elements of your locale, that makes you part of that locale. So as long as you speak the language and your mannerisms and the way you come across is from the area or influenced by the area, then you are from the area.
So a question I've got for you then is, where were you born?
I was born here.
Okay. What passport do you hold?
British.
Okay. What do you call yourself? British?
It depends on which context.
Just, are you British?
Well,
It's not a difficult
if
question.
I'm going through US customs, then I'm definitely British. I'm not Muslim.
If
but
someone stops you on the street and says, "Hey, what are you? Are you British? Are you Pakistani? Are you, Nigerian?"
Well, then I'm going to say British. If they say, "What am I?" I say, "Well, I'm
Okay,
human
you're
first,
British.
and
Yeah, but why do
Earthling second."
Why do you have such a reluctance to call yourself British?
I don't really have a reluctance to call myself British.
But you seem
It's
like
just-
you're skirting around the
No,
answer, and I've asked you 3 times.
No, because there are different ways it's understood. So people sometimes ask it in a nationalistic way. So where do your loyalties lie, or what is your, do you subscribe to David Cameron's,
Okay, so where do your
definition?
loyalties lie?
Well, my loyalties lie to God.
Okay.
Just like the famous Brit Sir Thomas More, who said that they were the Queen's good servant, but God's first.
Sorry, mate, can you stand up again? Can I ask you a question, if you don't mind? What's your name, mate?
Yeah,
Robbie.
Robbie.
Can I ask you a question, if that's all right?
Yeah, crack on.
I always want to do this test. I don't know why. I just wanted to do it. Right. Both my grandparents fought for Britain, right? One of my grandparents actually worked in the Cyprus bases helping the army trucks, the British army trucks. I was born here. I was born in Hackney, actually, in London. I love boxing, yeah? Consider myself a semi-pro boxer, right? I love fish and chips, which doesn't mean much anymore. People like curries, but I still like fish and chips, right? My kids, they love British castles. Just the other day, actually, they dress like knights. That's all they do. I make them swords with wood, and they dress like knights. I live in a majority white area in Bedfordshire. I, for example, used to fight in Peacock's gym in East London, and I love this country. And I think my role as a Muslim in this country is to do two major things. Number one, what the Prophet said, upon whom be peace, love for people what you love for yourself, right? He said it. And also to basically articulate in a compassionate and intelligent way my religion. If you don't like it, you don't like it, but we could have a conversation over a pint of milk. Let me ask you a question. In your eyes, am I British?
Yeah, well, you're British, yeah. But at the same time, a British Muslim would obviously, they're pigeonholed, or you put yourself in that pigeonhole. At the end of the day, what about a British Quran or British values with the Quran? Do you know what I mean? Because the Quran does not really teach.
Yeah, but the question is then, you're assuming that there is a thing called British values that you know what they are. What are British values then?
British values is what you guys brushed upon. And that is, well, trying to accept everyone's misgivings or faiths, beliefs, ideologies, and just accept it. And
let's work with this then.
Not debate it, but obviously Islam's up for debate.
Okay, then let's do an alignment, because I think it's quite powerful here, right?
I'll give you this leeway, yes.
Oh,
on this
thank you,
occasion.
thank you, sir.
Yeah, sure.
Thank you. It's so kind of you. I mean, you're so
Thank you.
gracious.
British value.
So the first thing, right? Individual rights. We have a similar concept in Islam. It's called huquq al-ibad, the rights of the individual. Number two, the rule of law. If you study history, the rule of law actually came from the Islamic tradition in Europe, because they saw the Muslims actually developing a legal framework. And he mentioned John Locke. John Locke used to love to study under someone called Edward Pocock. Edward Pocock was considered the first Orientalist. He was in Oxford University, and he learned a lot from the Islamic teachings. And John Locke, do you know what he wrote about governance? He said it should be a vicegerency. Translate that in Arabic. Khilafah, vicegerency. So there's a lot of sharing of culture, mate. The other thing, tolerance. One of the first treaties of tolerance was from the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace. It was called the Treaty of Najran. The Byzantines, Christians, hated on Christians. The Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, did a treaty with them, said, live peacefully with them, don't harm them, treat them well, allow them to worship their God. Democracy. If you call democracy justice and accountability, read the Quran. It's full, talks about justice all the time. And the Quran says, be just even if it's against your own selves, and don't let the hatred of others make you swerve from justice. So there's not a big problem, mate. But the problem is, though, what do those things really mean in practice? And that's the conversation we should have. Thanks, mate.
Good point, thank you. A question actually for Robbie. Robbie, do you know of many Muslims?
Yeah, a few.
Your area, do you know them well? Do you regularly?
No, I don't really. I don't really converse with many Muslims as such, but at the same time, it's not me. Like,
yes.
It's like, I know, try and like orchestrate that.
Yeah.
You know.
Is there a reason? Is it because they just don't approach you, or is it because you fear them?
They're unapproachable.
They're unapproachable. What do you think makes them, if you don't mind me asking, what do you think makes them unapproachable?
Because they're not up for debate, which is oxymoron, because
you can come to my house
for a
have you got
debate.
kids?
No, I haven't. Well, I've got a daughter.
You got a partner, daughter? When you come to my house? Honestly, dinner. That's a big invite. I'm not joking. If you want to fulfill that invite, I'll even pick you up with my own car. Yeah. Come to my house. I'll cook you a nice curry. I'm assuming you like curry. It's the favorite British dish, right? And we'll have a discussion. Honestly, you come to my house, yeah?
Robbie,
thank you. Open invite.
Robbie, thank you so much for your honesty there. So, look, Hamza, case in point here, Muslims don't mix. It is a big problem, and it's not just in the area of Portsmouth that you're from, but there are many areas where Muslims ghettoize. They're very isolated. They don't want to mix. So, isn't this whole idea around trying to have an inclusive society, what's wrong with that?
Well, I agree. This is why the organization I represent, which is the Islamic Education Research Academy, is all about getting Muslims to connect with the wider community, to see them as their own people. Because if you study the Quran, when the prophets came to their people, they saw them as their qawm. Ya qawmi, oh my people. They were so concerned about them because they wanted the truth for them, right? And having an intellectual, warm, compassionate dialogue. So from that perspective, Muslims should do much more. Yes, I'm not Muslim hating here, but I did come from a kind of secular humanist background became a Muslim 13 years ago, and what I've seen with the Muslim community, we are quite segregated, but you know what? It's not because they don't like the wider community, because there's a lot of cultural issues going on, because even within the Muslim community, there's segregation, right? You have a Bengali mosque, you got a Pakistani mosque, you got a post-1971 Pakistani mosque, you got a pre-71 Pakistani mosque. In Luton, for example, where I stay at the moment, within like 100 meters radius, you could have about 6 mosques, right? Now, the point here is what we need to do is go back to Islam, because when we moved away from Islam, we created a kind of nationalistic, well, we borrowed that from the Brits, didn't we? Yeah, divide and rule, but that's a different story. But the point is, we create this nationalism, because really, Muslims are taught, because we believe in the one creator, that we see the human family as a family. So from that perspective, we need to do more. We need to articulate a positive, compassionate case for our tradition, and just do more outreach. And it's very sad that this guy has never been to a Muslim's house before.
Okay.
I really feel really sad.
No, actually, I'd like to go to the Reverend. Reverend, question for you is, why has Christianity failed?
Well, Christianity has not failed. There is a passage in the Old Testament, in the book of prophet Ezekiel, where there is a value dry bones. Dry bones. And the question is, can these dry bones live? And of course, God brings back the dry bones to life. So my question here is that I know there is a narrative which puts across the idea of Christianity is in decline. There is an element of truth insofar as Christianity, because of Western European culture, has suffered all sorts of onslaughts and attacks which many Muslims coming from, if I may say so, more conservative societies have not had. So Christianity has undergone a process of negative. Now, there was a wonderful Rabbi Adin Zalsel. He gave a talk in Oxford last few years ago. And he said that, yes, there is an Archbishop of Canterbury, but what power has he got? What power has he got? There are churches, but there are few congregations. Church of England is selling many of its properties. And he's talking about idolatry, which is coming back. Paganism. The god of money, mammon, the god of sex, Ashtart, and indeed the most important god, one of the most important gods of our time, the god of celebrity, the god of fame. A very minor figure. She's actually not a goddess, but she's a muse. The point here is, and a celebrity is someone who is a nobody, but everybody knows them. So a celebrity is actually a non-entity. So these are the new gods of our culture. And it's very difficult to fight these pseudo-gods, these pseudo-values. And here my argument actually that we can be good Christians, a good Muslims, can be allied in a fight against the new idolatry, the new paganism. And indeed, just yesterday, the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar in Egypt visiting the Archbishop of Canterbury, and they signed a statement, which obviously a bit anodyne, but it's very interesting. They agreed that there was a common fight against materialism.
So a question I have for you, Reverend, following on for that, are Christian values also British values?
Well, I mean, if you know anything about English history, in 497 AD, a man called Augustine baptizes the King of the Angles, Ethelbert, in Canterbury. And from that moment, that is the official time of Christianity in England. And it goes on until the Reformation. Then it changes. Henry VIII, a ghastly man, he makes himself the head of the church, but still, England is Christian. And indeed, I must say, the Church of England has been a partner with the English people, with this epic, let's say, okay, I'm a critic of the British Empire, but it was an epic affair. The English race spreading across the world. Talk about colonialism as much as you like, yes, but it's a fact. And the Church of England has been a partner.
Is it really a Christian society perhaps many would actually class as a secular society?
Today,
because Christianity had failed.
Today, we've got two different models of the relationship between the church and the world. One is a model of the church with culture, working alongside culture. So when English culture was by and large Christian. The Church of England was in partnership with it. But we also have a different model, Christianity of the church against culture. And there was an ancient writer called Tertullian who said to the pagans, we are not like you. We don't live like you. We do not kill our children. We do not kill each other in war. Instead, we love each other. So quite clear, I think Christianity created a new type of man, like in just Islam.
But Christianity created
Okay.
liberalism and secularism, no?
Those
Because
are...
it failed. The Catholic Church
well,
used
no,
the curse
I
of
think-
the state.
No, I don't agree.
No?
I think the Catholic Church is
Let's
a big
move
animal.
on from that discussion because I'm mindful that we want to cover a few issues. I suppose the one that I'd like to ask you is, why do you feel there is a huge amount of pressure upon the community to almost forcibly accept British values?
Okay, I mean, this
And for there to be a move towards classing the Muslim community as being extreme?
But this is related to a clarification I wanted to make a point. First and foremost, the reason why I'm a bit uneasy about any invocation of nationality, it doesn't matter if it's British, Pakistani, Saudi, Tunisian, whatever. I don't really care the name or the country. It's because as Muslims we believe in humanity, Bani Adam, right? We're humanitarian. We don't see the borders. We see human beings, and we love all human beings, and we're concerned for all human beings. And of course, Islam urges that we should obviously show priority to those around us. So as Muslims living in the UK, because we are around people who are British, we show concern, but not because they're British, because they're human beings that have desires, fears, hopes, and aspirations, and we work in the good, we cooperate in the good. So that's why I'm a bit finicky about invocations of nationality, because nationality has become the secular religion of the age. It's become the secular god of which we must burn a pinch of incense to quote the Roman tradition, that we have to give deference to or to show our loyalty to. How about being loyalty to each other as people, as human beings and so on? How about being witnesses to the truth? How about being, I think it was from the hadith of Rasulullah about if you basically really care about people, if you want to show them love, then you are, brothers, you are mirrors to them, You show them their faults and you show them their good, what they're doing good, and you help each other, you give constructive criticism. So that's first of all, my clarification is, first and foremost, I consider myself to be humanitarian because Islam mandates that me to be so. So I don't really care about nationality per se, whichever country I'm in, Madagascar, Mongolia, wherever, I don't really care. But I would like to say, in reference to what was said earlier on about Muslims and ghettoization, here's the thing. Everyone talks about Muslims or Asians or ghettos, or they used to talk about black ghettos in the 1980s. But no one talks about the phenomenon of white flight. When Asians move into an area, sociologists have noticed that a lot of the white English ethnic group or classification seems to move out of the area. Understanding is a two-way street, and I don't think that the media and the government have done enough or done anything at all, really, to promote a two-way understanding, and that has to happen. Otherwise, you're not going to get the kind of discourse or engagement, because people are always scared of each other, and that's the problem.
Yeah, but as leaders of the community, bro, that's why I slightly disagree with you.
I'm not really a leader of the community.
Well,
but, yeah.
a representative or someone who speaks and has followers, because by definition, a leader is someone who has followers, right? You've got a good Facebook followers. Anyway, the point I'm trying to say is, although I do agree with you, but that puts us in a victimhood mentality. What I think is we should do something called enrolling people in our behavior. For example, if a family doesn't have love and someone complains to me and says, my dad doesn't love me, do you know what I say to them? When was the last time you told your dad you love them or you love him? Oh, never. Well, enroll him in your behavior. So what I think we should do, because we believe we have the truth, we believe we have the right set of values and we have the right philosophy and worldview, that should empower us to say, you know what, we need to wake up, we need to qum fa'andir, we need to rise and warn and articulate a compassionate case. So I do agree with you, there's that white flight, but we need to do a lot of work in our community, frankly, and that's what we're about. MDI is about that, iERA is about that. I don't know what you're about yet, but we're going to
Let's take
the point is,
from...
we need to basically have that victim mentality, do you see?
I don't disagree with you, but I'm just making observation. I'm
Yeah,
saying that
agreed.
if we only say only Muslims are the ones that have the problem, then we only target a solution to Muslims. I'm saying, like you, we should broaden our target to everybody. And that's why we do these debates.
Thank you. Point made. Let's go to the audience. Who has a question? Yes. Would you just put your hands straight up? Okay, that gentleman over there. Thank you. Your name, where you're from, and who your question is.
My name is
directed
Fahim.
at.
I'm from Kingston, so I'm a local. It's just an extension to the question which the gentleman asked, and to a point you made. If this British values are based on Christian beliefs, does that mean that Islam, because it has theological differences with Christianity, then it's not compatible? Does that make sense?
Reverend.
We have some important overlaps, some values we share in common. For example, the family, the central importance of a family in the life of society, which is really a core value without which society cannot function. So we have, for example, a common interest in upholding the values of a family against those who try to bring down the family. I would say spirituality. Certainly, a friend of mine is actually a Shia Imam. His name is Shah Mahmoud. And there was a lecture when he said something about the coming of Imam Mahdi, which I felt, boy, no, that's deep. That's profound. So these are the examples. We can learn from each other on spirituality, on the values of family, on peace and so on. But there are also things which separate us. Let's not be too starry-eyed.
But the main difference is that you believe Jesus, peace be upon him, is the Son of God. This is something we
yes, indeed. I mean, that's very well known. And that's always comes up when you have Dawah guys who always bring that up and so on. It is. And let's talk about it. Let's have a great discussion. And let's agree where we disagree. I mean, there you are.
Okay,
Thank you so much. That's a great question. Okay, let's go to the other gentleman who had his hand up. You still there, sir? Okay, kindly stand up, give us your name, where you're from, and who your question is directed to.
Hi, my name is Gamal, and I am from Barnet, I would say. The question is, Director Mr. Gelli, is with relation to your knowledge of, or the background understanding of various religions, Judaism, Christianity,
Various
understanding
religions.
of different religions, values of Christianity, Judaism, Islam. I have brushed over Judaism and Christianity with reference to the values of life and the way that we should behave toward each other in a humanitarian way and so on. And I could not find any contradiction. So could you possibly pinpoint where the contradiction is?
Well, I mean, the contradictions would be, for example, in matters of, the 5 pillars of Islam, which actually are perfectly compatible with Islam, with British society. But the Hajj has an implicit assertion of superiority of Muslims over non-Muslims, because Christians and Jews cannot go to Mecca, Medina. So there is built into the Hajj.
They can go.
Well, you are the first guy who comes up with that.
Because all they have to say is,
That's
all you have to say, man.
Yeah, it's very easy, but I mean, it's maybe too easy. So that's only a small example. But there also...
Just a question on that. As a Muslim, self-hating one in this occasion,
Right.
am I allowed to take communion?
Well, I mean, if you came, if I knew you and you were coming, I would say, I can give you a blessing, but I cannot give you communion.
Okay.
Because you are not a member of the body of a church.
Okay, so what you're saying is for Muslims to have a pilgrimage exclusively for Muslims is not on.
No, I didn't say it's not on because it's a Muslim
But
too.
that sounds like what you were alluding to, that it's an exclusive club.
There's an element of that included in it, and we got to accept that. I mean,
but I cannot drink the blood of Christ and eat the body of Christ.
Well, I mean,
and all that.
just as well as I cannot. I mean, in some countries you cannot go into a mosque unless you're a Muslim. Yes, it is true. In Morocco, you are not can't go into a mosque.
But it's not right, I'm saying. I'm not saying you're not right, I'm saying that's not right. They shouldn't do that.
Well,
mosques are open for everybody.
All I'm saying is that we all have exclusions, which are right, actually, because why...
but you said the word superiority, and do you know about Hajj? You have to dress in 2 pieces of white cloth.
Yes, I know.
You sleep on the dust and floor. You're searching in the mud and the
I
dust
know
with pebbles.
that. I know
There's
that,
no
Hamza.
superiority there.
I know,
It's
Hamza,
humility.
but
It's
it's
humility.
an assertion built into it is an asserted superiority of Islam over Christians and Jews. Because Christians and Jews cannot go to Mecca and Medina.
But
Simple
the
as
same
that.
very logic.
You can go to St. Peter's, you can come into a church.
I agree. I know, but you're missing the point. The same very
I don't think I am.
logic, when we apply it to the communion, then your argument breaks down. Does that mean
No.
there's something superior about you? I can't take communion?
No, I
Do you
mean,
see the point? That's what
why-
the...
What would be the point of
I
someone who
can't take
doesn't
communion
believe
now.
in Holy Communion to receive communion?
But that's
What
the
would be
point. So what's the point of going to Hajj if you don't believe in it? It's a key pillar.
But it is Muslim, so excluding people from
Okay,
Mecca and Medina.
Abdullah, a question.
I'm not-
for
Just
you.
say ashhadu.
Okay, question. Sorry, Abdullah. Because you're there on your own, my intention is obviously clearly here, because Anne should have been there, and clearly she's now at some kebab shop eating a halal doner. Hope she knows it's halal. Okay, so Abdullah, what do you deem as an Islamic value?
An Islamic value?
What is an Islamic value?
Well, first and foremost, I just wanted to mention, I think, you know, the Muslim speaker, Zakir Naik, couldn't come to England. So does that make England now superior or supremacist to everybody else? You know, if you can't get a visa to some places, you can't go.
Supremacy, as my initial point, George Orwell said English people consider themselves superior to foreigners.
Or, well, I could say Shabbat Ali can't go to the United States. I mean, you know, it's
That's
not just
slightly
English
different
people and so on, although maybe they're descendants. But
back to
okay, yeah,
I'd love to hear your view on that.
okay. Well, I mean, what makes a value attached to any adjective really? It's origins, or is how it's derived. So if you have a value which is derived from the Quran, then it becomes an Islamic value. It doesn't necessarily mean that someone else can't also share a particular value, or at least just the label. For example, justice. So everyone believes in justice. You know, I'm not going to say everyone believes in hurriya, or a freedom, or kind of freedom. We only differ now on the issues of equality and freedom and justice in interpretation, right? And that's the same with everyone, even amongst liberals, they differ amongst themselves as to what is equality, justice, and so on and so forth, and they sometimes mutually exclude each other from universities. So that's just the situation. I would say that Islamic value is just something that's derived from the Quran and Sunnah, and we shouldn't have any. We shouldn't be shy to say that we believe in values which are Islamic. It doesn't mean now that we don't share those values with our theological cousins in Christianity and Judaism, of which we believe they were also people who received revelation in the past as well. So yeah, and we should be proud of this. But my point about British values, and the title of this debate is Islam compatible with British values? Unlike Islam and Christianity and Judaism, you know, Britain there wasn't a book that came down from the sky which defined British values. And I'm pretty sure that David Cameron and Theresa May are not prophets, last time I checked, despite what they say. So that's my problem. That's why I said that the label of British values, or any national values of any country in the world, is an unjust label, because it gives certain people, usually a minority, the right to define something and then impose it on everybody else. Whereas what I would say is that everyone who comes to this country throughout history has naturally formed an equilibrium with those who came before them, most of them all immigrants anyway, Anglo-Saxons and so on, all the way up. So, and just let that natural process happen anyway. Why now we're going to define certain things, and now we're going to be intolerant against people based on an arbitrary defined set of values, and that's my issue.
A question I have for you then is, perhaps if Anne or Paul or Steve, if they were here, they'd say, look, we see many cases of grooming gangs. We see many instances of benefit fraud. We see, let's say, for example, this whole ghettoized culture. It just so happens a lot of these people, when they're reported in the press, have Muslim names. There seems to be a problem. Are these the Islamic values that you're talking about?
Well, if Tommy was to say that, coming from a person who's been convicted of fraud, I would say, of course you've seen it, from a first-person perspective. I would say that people who cite, and they usually cite paedophilia as an issue, I would say that for people who previously probably themselves viewed Jimmy Savile and or Gary Glitter as national icons of this country, they should adopt some humility when accusing other people of paedophilia, when their leaders, elected leaders, have paedophile rings, even killing boys in certain hotels in London. I should think that they should be a little bit reticent to start condemning other people, so-called Asian gangs. I mean, what's the difference between Asian gangs and this paedophile ring? What, they're not elected?
But just to add to
So,
that,
no. So that's the point. And let's look at the statistics, right? So in the UK, currently, of those people, of the prison population of convicted paedophiles, according to the Majesty's Prison Service report in 2007, 93% of people who are convicted for paedophilia are what we define as white or English white. Only 7% are black or Asian, which roughly correlates to 7% of the population being black or Asian. So, and 85% of the population of UK is white English, quote unquote, which means that white English are overrepresented when it comes to paedophilia. And of that ethnic group, from according to statistics, they are more likely to target children below the age of 11, whereas other groups will target the children above the age of 11. So if we want to look at statistics, it's actually more damning. But it seems that if Asians or some brown face or some non-white face does it, oh, how dare they do it? These are animals going through our country and corrupting our youth and doing these bad things. But when people who are of the appropriate skin color seem to do it, then it's not such a big hooper.
What do you mean by appropriate?
Well, just look at how they react, right? So do we see EDL going on a march outside number 10 Downing Street for the paedophile rings that were there? Do we see the EDL going on a march against many of these former icons, or protesting or demonstrating, or having even a general demonstration against paedophilia full stop? No, it always seems to be if these foreigners who have come into our country, even though these people,
Thank you. Point
taken.
taken.
You're right, and I wanted to speak to Paul actually, but he somehow chickened out or something because he said, "I'll die for this country," but he's so scared he had to security measures had to not attend this debate. But what I would say is, grooming from a sociological perspective is based on alcohol, money, and drugs. All of these things are categorically forbidden in Islam. So why do they say Muslim grooming?
Is money forbidden in Islam?
No, in terms of, obviously
money.
not. In materialism, excessive greed, stealings, obviously. Yeah,
Well, that's...
So the whole grooming thing is like antithetical to Islam. But what's quite interesting, Tommy and Co, they drink. I don't know about the drugs yet, but there's been some accusations. And about the fraud. So they're actually the cause for the grooming because they facilitate those things. And that's the irony. So I don't like Paul going around the country saying Muslim grooming, because at the end of the day, Paul, the very basis and foundation, sociological element of why grooming happens, you're supporting because you drink. Well, I don't know about the drugs, but anyway. And the money stuff. So the point is, drop the word Muslim because all of these things are categorically forbidden in Islam. And that's why no one has actually pounced on them on that, and they should. It's wrong. And it's rhetoric, it's social rhetoric, it's political rhetoric, it's damaging. And if they're really sincere, they call themselves a Christian, Paul calls himself a sincere Christian, a chivalrous kind of knightly warrior. If you're really sincere, drop the word. Because all of the things that facilitate grooming are actually not Islamic.
So, sorry.
Do you get the point? Does that make sense?
Short point.
Yeah, very short. Basically, I don't think there's any correlation between skin color, ethnicity to crime, all right? Crime is a human problem. Humans do it, and all humans have done nasty things, right? So skin color is irrelevant. But the reason, and I wanted to make the point with Paul Golding and Tommy Robinson here, the reason why people suspect them of being racist is because they only cause a fuss if it's non-white English people doing it. It reminds me of that joke they said about people from the United States in the southern part. They say the only person that's going to sleep with my sister is me, right? And it seems like the only people that they would, they got it, delayed reaction. And so it seems like that the only people that the EDL and Britain First are okay to commit paedophilia, judging by their lack of reaction, is people of the same ethnic group.
Okay, thank you. Reverend, question for you. Tommy Robinson, Paul Golding, Anne-Marie Waters, all professed Christians. Isn't the problem with Christianity?
Well, I mean, the people you mentioned in my book are yobs. Are rabble-rousers. They are the lowest of the low. I mean, even educationally, all you have to listen to Tommy Robinson speaking and realize the man really has no education to speak of. I don't know about Golding or the lady, but I would not take them as a model anymore because we must not fall into the trap of sort of putting up some straw men. Like someone could say, Anjem Chaudhry. No, he's a typical Muslim, isn't he? And of course, he's a darling of the media. They love to wheel him in so they can fire away his nonsense. So, all our religions have people who are not the best representatives. And I'm sure Golding and Tommy Roberts, these people are rabble-rousers, are yobs. You can tell them straight away, just you have to look at them the way you speak. They say they're Christians. Actually, I don't believe it. I don't believe it, because if you're a Christian, your behavior should be informed by the principles of the gospel, and I can't see the principle of the gospel. If you're going to hate, slag another religion, that in my book is a sign of a low mentality, of a low mind.
Sorry, if you may come back. I want to also go back to the audience, because I know the audience are itching to ask questions. Is there somebody who has not asked a question that would like to ask a question, please? Put your hands up. Put your hands up. Too many shy people. Where? Let's have a look. Would you stand up, put your hands up? Right up. Oh, great. What is your name? Where are you from?
My name's Damo. I'm from Crawley.
Damo?
Yeah.
From Crawley, up the road. Okay, great. And who is your question directed to?
Hamza.
Hamza.
Hiya.
I'm writing your name down so don't forget it.
Can I come round to your house and have a curry as well?
Yes.
Of course you can. Honestly, at the end of the discussion, just take my number and we'll organise it.
Okay, that's not my real question.
Oh, okay.
But thanks anyway. Do you think that groups like Islamic State, Boko Haram, Al-Shabaab, Al-Qaeda are misrepresenting Islamic values? And if so, why do you think that they misrepresent them in virtually identical ways?
Very good question.
Well, that's a very, very deep, very good question. Yeah. Now, my view, I've written about this, it's on the iERA website, it's on my own personal website as well.
Keep your response
I'll try my best.
concise.
I'll
sir.
try my best.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. So, Demo, basically I've written about this. It's an article on the iERA website and my personal website on Islamic values and the so-called Islamic State. And basically what I do a historical analysis and link it to the values of the prophetic tradition and the Quran to show that essentially the Islamic State was about rahmah, which means mercy and compassion, tolerance, and all of these things, and especially economic liberation and emancipation, where one Jew, a Jewish rabbi in 1453, when he was being persecuted in Spain, he invited all of his brethren, he said, "Oh, my brethren, come to the land of the Ottomans, the Turks. Rich are the fruits of the earth, we live in peace and freedom, and we're not oppressed with heavy taxes." So, obviously, I disagree with that narrative. Why do I think they're doing it? To be honest, I don't really know. My hunch is that sometimes when we point the finger, there is sometimes three fingers pointing back. I don't agree with this, they're just evil, and there's something inherently wrong with them, and there's something wrong with their DNA, and they're like, not human. Yes, that might be the case. But the point is, they don't exist in a vacuum. So I would argue, and we need to be fair, if what it means to be British is to be truthful, then what we have to understand is this. Has this nation and other nations of liberal kind and secular kind, have they been kind in their foreign policy? Have soldiers died for right causes? I would humbly say, as a human being and as a Brit, no, they haven't. Because these causes have been about money. It's about divide and rule. Trust me, just because in the Canary Wharf, we think Britain's first because some guy in Canary Wharf, his name is Johnny, right? But at the end of the day, all they care about is the bleeding dollar, don't they? They don't really care about you and me. So the point here is, I think negative foreign policy, according to academics like Professor Pape and others, they said there is a political environment that puts oxygen to that. So it's like, there's a lot of factors. I don't know the real answer, but there's something there in what I've said.
Okay, what I'd like to do is extend that same question, if you could again be concise as you can, Damo.
The whole history of terrorism in 2 minutes. All right. Why they exist, why those groups exist. And they exist, unfortunately, because it manifests itself as humanity does in such situations. You had the iERA, for example. Right? The iERA, they sometimes couch some of their justifications in a biblical language. You have the groups in Africa.
No, I'm sorry, Hamza. The IRA was always secularist. Abdullah. They never invoked religion or the Bible.
There were some pro-IRA priests who would invoke biblical verses. But you have Lord's Liberation Army in Africa who invoke biblical verses, and they call themselves a Christian group. They're not Christian, but they invoke it. And why do they evoke these verses? It's because they come from areas whereby people are generally religious. So the only way that you get people to listen to you is you justify what you do according to quotations, but they're purely secular in how they operate, in how they justify any of their acts. Their acts are against Islam. Osama bin Laden admitted on Al Jazeera that the Prophet Muhammad did indeed prohibit attacks against civilians. But, as Osama bin Laden said, the law isn't set in stone. I think it is set in stone. I'm not a modernist. Right? But Osama bin Laden apparently is, because he's willing to engage in tactics which he says he imitates from the West. And the verse of the Quran they bring is not a verse of the Quran where they say, kill unbelievers or slay unbelievers. No, it's really just they bring up verse of the Quran which says, fight them as they fight you. Of course, if they kept reading, it would say, but do not go transgress the limits of God. God does not like the transgressors. And proof of this is through countless counter-terrorism studies. Countless academic studies have proven this. I'm just going to cite you just one, just to qualify what I've said. So we see Arizona State University. There was research funded by the Office of Naval Research, and they analyzed 2,000 extremist publications or terrorist publications between 1988 and 2011, so by Muslims. And they concluded that these terrorists were not aiming to destroy or attack Western civilization, but they viewed their struggle as defensive. And here's what they said. They said, we conclude that verses extremists cite from the Quran do not suggest an aggressive, offensive foe seeking domination and conquest of unbelievers, as is commonly assumed. Instead, they deal with themes of victimization, dishonor, and retribution. So all they try to evoke in these verses is, look, these people are attacking us, we should get revenge, look how they've killed our people, and then they do un-Islamic things. You see, and that's just the way, unfortunately, the way of many of these nut jobs in the world. They try to get justification from whichever culture they come from, using the whatever is valued in that culture to justify what essentially is unjustifiable.
Thank you so much. Damo, question for you, if I may ask. Are you able to make a distinction between Islam and the likes of ISIS and Boko Haram, etc.?
Not really. It seems to me that they follow the most literal reading or straightforward interpretations of the Quran and the Sunnah and the Hadith. And
yes,
I think it takes a lot more interpretive skills to get away from that and become more moderate.
When the Prophet Muhammad said, do not kill women, or, and there was other commands and narrations where do not kill women and children, do not kill the poor, the weak, and so on and so forth. So not to kill the weak or the elderly or so on. We actually have so many explicit texts which says don't kill civilians, don't strike against a person that did not cause the crime. There's so many explicit texts. You have to be a wordsmith and doing mental gymnastics to actually go around those texts. And that's what the terrorists do. The terrorists are the ones who juggle around the text. I wish they were literalist. I actually wish they were fundamentalists. Unfortunately, what they cite as their example, if you listen to what Osama bin Laden says, when people ask him, why are you doing what you did? Why are you doing what you're doing? And they said, well, look at Winston Churchill. He bombed civilians. He firebombed people. Look at Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Look at them. If the West can do it, so can I. That's what he bases his example on. A literal reading of Western history. I think that's the problem.
So, thank you. There is a large community of Muslims in Crawley. Has been your exposure to that community?
I know a few. I suppose you call them cultural Muslims. So they're not overly. They don't go to the mosque every Friday. They'll have a pint every now and again, but they still call themselves Muslims.
A pint of what, may we ask?
Pint of lager.
Okay.
But then I also know that there are very serious devout Muslims in Crawley, and I know that one of them was the first suicide bomber in Syria.
So,
Let me say something. It should be very important that people at large knew of the views and the arguments of Muslim intellectuals like Ziauddin Sardar, Tariq Ramadan, and they are Muslims who, from an Islamic believing point of view, have criticized some of these ideologies and have even put forward, certainly Tariq Ramadan put forward the idea that some of the hudud should be bracketed, because those punishments in countries like Saudi Arabia actually tend to target the powerless, women and people who are not, you don't get the Saudi princes tried, and they don't get the hudud punishments. So it's very interesting. One should learn about what the Islamic intellectuals like Tariq Ramadan, Ziauddin Sardar are saying, so to have a more nuanced view of Islam, and not just, some extreme.
Damo, question for you is, you'll see a room here full of people who, I would say, en masse, practice their faith. How do you feel? Are you nervous at all? Are you fearful?
No,
there haven't been any beheadings yet, but to be honest, it is quite
It's early, though.
But how do you feel generally? Because you can see the atmosphere here is pretty low-key, right?
Yeah, it's pretty jovial.
Good, okay, excellent. Thank you so much, Damo. Let's give him a clap, because I think that's quite a brilliant question to be asking. Thank you. Let's take another question from the audience. Okay, there are lots more people. There is a gentleman there with a fine afro. Would you kindly stand up? That's wonderful. What is your name? Where are you from, sir? Are you one of the Jackson 5?
My name's Blaze. I went to school in Crawley as well.
Your name is?
Blaze.
Blaze.
Blaze, yeah.
Brilliant. That is such a brilliant name. Thank you.
Cheers.
Just
wanting to everyone, really.
Sure.
I went to Hayswick School, which is where my friend's dad was the person who went to Syria and drove the...
Your friend's dad?
My friend's dad went to Syria and drove the explosives into the prison. Now, in school, some of my best friends are Muslims, it's a majority Muslim school. We see a lot of division between the quite extreme Muslims, moderate Muslims, and then just general population of the school. And I think it's all well and good talking about the fact that Muslims, they can integrate, it's fine. There's no clash with British values. There's no real clash. If they like the grooming gangs, they're not Muslims. They're not properly engaging in Muslim practice. But from a sort of practical level, sometimes it's just like the Islamic community is not properly focusing on the key issue. And so earlier we talked about these grooming gangs. It almost came onto this victimization, which Hamza sort of addressed, but we never addressed the actual issues. It never comes across as the issues are bad. It's always, maybe this all there's bias in the media and all this. But sometimes I think it'd be best if we all just came out as one, just condemning these things first and then talking about things afterwards. I think that's a lot of unrest in the communities caused by people think, they don't really believe that. They're just saying that, and it's the moderates who are engaging in sort of a chat about it. But then some people are really just sort of implicitly going along with it. So
who would you like to ask that question to?
Anyone really like.
Okay.
It's just because as we've progressed so far, we haven't really had to deal with any questions. Everyone's been quite. You've also agreed with each other. It would be good to see how you respond to that.
I can appreciate we're kind of down three racists. Three people.
sorry. Yeah.
So we're kind of having to. I'm now playing the evil one here. I just generally do that anyway. Right, Hamza.
Okay. How many Muslims in the audience? Just put your hand up if you don't mind. Muslims. Damon, no, not you, no. Basically, in the last month, when was the last time your non-Muslim neighbor in your neighborhood, if you don't have a direct neighbor, came to your house for dinner? Be very honest. In the last month. Okay. Now, in the last 6 months. Okay. In the last year. See, and this is where the problem lies, bro. And I think the problem lies in that. And I'm going to be very honest, I really believe we have a truthful, powerful tradition. The Prophet Muhammad, upon him be peace, even allowed pagans and polytheists in his home, and they had milk and food and even humor, and it was beautiful. I think what we need to do as a community is basically, again, stop the victim stuff. I mean, I just hate the victim stuff. When I look into the traditions of the Prophet upon him be peace, he never blamed anybody. Actually, a prophetic spiritual practice, the only person you should blame is God. I complain to God alone, then I'm going to do my stuff, right? I'm going to enroll people in my positive behavior. And I'm going to be frank, from my perspective, I think the Muslim community has become victims. There are some groups and ideologies and peoples within the Muslim community that play on that victim mentality. It doesn't mean there's no wrongdoing, there is, by the way. But we should transfer that energy to positive energy like the Prophet did, and invite people to your home, man. Just be positive beacons of light for the community. And if I were going to add another value on the British list, right, the British value so-called list, is compassion. And Ibn Qayyim al-Jawziyah, the 14th century medieval theologian, he said, where you see rahmah, where you see compassion, you must see Islam, you must see Muslims. So my only hope is that all of you guys in this room who consider themselves people who love the Prophet, people who love Islam, forget the media, forget Fox News, forget this. We believe in Tawheed, which means the oneness of God. We say there is no true power apart from His power, which means anything else is just an empty tool that He uses to manifest His will. So therefore, just rely on Him and invite people to your home. And that's what you need to do, and just really share your values. If you don't, they're going to see you as a segregated community, and that's not what Islam's about.
Reverend. What Blazes was, his question was alluding to the question of extremism, a word which is used a lot to, the new counter-terrorism legislation is like a gun pointed at the head of Muslims, in fact. It does target Muslims in that sense. But I think it's very important we make a distinction between violent extremism and non-violent. So one puts forward a robust critique or some secular ideas from a point of view of a religious state, a caliphate, fine, they should be allowed to do it. But when it comes to if someone in a school says, I want to blow up people on a train, well, you wouldn't want a spotty teenager to blow you up, would you? I don't think any of us would like that. So that should be stopped. Violence, for me, is one of the fundamental criteria which separates people who can have an ideological perspective, and I myself do criticize secularism of the secular state from a Christian point of view, from a point of view of the Bible. Earlier on, English culture, British culture, the Bible for a long time was a keystone of English culture. So my point is that we should be mindful of this distinction between violent extremism and non-violent. That's fundamental.
Thank you so much. Abdullah.
Okay, let me just answer your point directly. There was a leaked MI5 report. It was leaked a couple of years ago. And it said that what the MI5 had done research into how to profile terrorists, how to predict a terrorist. And one of the things they found was shocking. They found that the more religious a Muslim is, the least likely they are to commit acts of terrorism. The more knowledgeable they are about Islam, the least likely they are to commit acts of terrorism. But they found that street youths, yobs, secular, non-practicing Muslims were more likely to commit acts of terrorism. Those who didn't know their religion, who didn't know what Islam taught. And so for them, they see the news, they become angry about what they see around the world, Western foreign policy, and they go off and they have an un-Islamic reaction to it. And they say, I'm angry about this, I'm going to discharge anger how I see fit in whatever way. And that's the problem. It's the lack of understanding of Islam. And the problem is that those who are not inside the Muslim community don't see this. For you guys, you're probably told by newspapers and by media that it's the religious Muslims who commit acts of terrorism, even though we see countless accounts. There's a French guy who was a prisoner of ISIS, and while he was a prisoner of ISIS, he wanted to learn more about the Quran and discuss with them, and they didn't have a Quran on them, they didn't even want to discuss the Quran with him. And it's shocking, and then it turns out that ISIS were basically created by secular Baathists, and that came out in the Spiegel newspaper. So it's a false understanding that religion or being religious makes you terrorist. It's quite the opposite. That's why I'm saying that what the problem with the Muslim community is that we're not fundamentalist enough. We're not literalist enough. Because if you don't need, to answer the other guy, you don't need a scholar to give a fatwa to say terrorism is wrong. You really don't need a scholar. Just like you don't need a scholar to say murder is wrong or and so on. It's because every Muslim knows it, right? And after 9/11, you couldn't go into a mosque without hearing a condemnation of terrorism. But the thing is, when Muslims condemn terrorism, there ain't no media there. But if you get one crazy ranty person who says very inflammatory things, very nasty things, you'll get front page coverage for that individual and invite all the TV networks.
Blaze, do you feel that's answered your question? Very good question.
Partially, I just think from when you see it on a first-hand level, when you see these sort of things being said like at school, it's just they're the ones who you get it's not people who don't really understand their religion. They say they're Muslim and they just do whatever. But obviously, if that report contravenes what I'm saying, that's fine. But sometimes I just feel, and there is a basis for people in Islam to come out, Muslims to come out, and I have heard on many occasions them condemn terrorism. But I just think there is an additional duty.
Do you not agree that the media has a big part to play in this? Because if they are not highlighting those people coming out from the community and talking about this issue and condemning and putting the positive messaging out, do you think they have a part to play as well?
Duty on the media to put that across as much as possible, but there's also...
So what we're saying is if you're not seeing it, it doesn't necessarily mean it's not happening.
Yeah, but I've seen on many occasions people come out and condemn it, but...
Even when we condemn it, we're shown to not condemn it. I remember Nico Hines, I believe, from the Time. He basically, I think it was him, by the way, it could have been someone else. Basically, he tried to link me to the Boston bomber, right? He said, oh, the Boston bomber liked a YouTube channel, and one of my videos happened to be on the YouTube channel. So I search for the channel, I find the only video at the time, which was mine on the YouTube channel, and it was a video condemning terrorism. I mean, do you see? We have liars in the media, bro.
Yeah, definitely. I'm not trying to say that Muslims condone these actions. I'm just trying to say that they obviously it's just...
The side point. I debated a guy from the EDL. It was I think it was a University of Southampton. I forgot which it was, or Bournemouth, whatever. I debated a guy from the EDL there, and he said, look, we have the internet these days. We don't need the media. How comes I don't see any Muslims, thousands of Muslims or whoever, condemning terrorism on the internet? And I asked him, have you Google searched it? He said, no. Then how are you going to find it? Seek and ye shall find. And that's the thing, is that it's ignorance on all sides. And the government plays on that ignorance. And so I think as Muslims, obviously we should go out there more and do more and so on, but we do that. But I also think that as everyone in the UK has to actually go out and even if it's just Google search it, because you'll find countless, thousands of scholars, notables, reputables in the Muslim community condemning terrorism and claiming that Islam is a religion of peace with evidences and showing it from Islamic texts. But the thing is that people don't search, and so we should search for it.
No, thank you. Very good point. Blaze, thank you very much. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you. Okay, so we'd like to conclude the event. So we have, actually time is up. However, we have that final question that I would like all panelists to answer in the space of 1 minute each. Do Islamic values clash with British values? Hamza.
I think as Muslims living in Britain, we can show that Islamic values are very powerful in terms of there is a linguistic overlap at least concerning justice, accountability, tolerance, individual rights, and the rule of law. But what we can do under the kind of value of compassion and tolerance is start to articulate what that really means and where we should go as a nation and as not only a nation but as a human race concerning these values, and Islam should be part of that conversation. I just want to end with the wonderful words of the Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, which I already mentioned, had treatises on tolerance, resonated with justice, accountability, individual rights, and all of these things. But this is beautiful for me. The Prophet Muhammad, upon whom be peace, said, you must be gentle. This also means you must be compassionate. When gentleness and compassion is in anything, it beautifies it. And when you remove it, then it disgraces it. So Muslims should be compassionate wherever they go. Thank you.
Thank you. Reverend.
Someone said there is only one Islam, but there are several interpretations of it. There is Shia Islam, there is Ahmadiyya. I know the Ahmadiyya are the bad boys, but we are not going to that. There's some Sufi fraternities, who are very spiritual, very quietistic, and many, above all, lots of ordinary Muslims who just want to have a good life for themselves, for their children, their families, who are not, got nothing with violence and terrorism. So that is very important. We should always remember. But I want to go back. Well, you mentioned, of course, you had a quotation. I'm going to have a quotation as well, which is from the book of Acts, where St. Peter and the apostles say, we must obey God rather than men. We must obey God rather than men.
Thank you so much. Very good. Abdullah Andalusi.
I say there is no clash because there's nothing to clash with. There are people that live on these isles. There are good people, nice people, people that want to get on with their lives, that worry about their kids and want a good education, want a good life for themselves and their children. And as Muslims, we have the same desire, and we also have the same desire for them. So we well wish them, we want them to be happy and prosperous. We are told to be witnesses to mankind, to be good advisors. The Quran tells us to, when it comes to non-Muslims, very specifically, behave with them in the world kindly. It also says that God does not forbid you to deal justly and kindly with those who fought not against you on the account of your religion and did not drive you out of your homes. Very Allah loves those who deal with equity. So I would say that the Quran says, "Lakum dinakum waliya din," to you your way of life, and to me mine. We can live together. We don't have to impose on each other. We don't have to force each other. We don't have to say to each other that as long as you follow law, we'll leave you alone, but not anymore. We can live together peacefully only if we want to. And that's the real issue. There is only a clash if we make it a clash, or we allow those who are divisive, who may have been recently elected, to make that clash, right? But if we reach out to each other, we show each other that we're human, and we show each other that we believe in our beliefs with strong conviction and with sincerity, then there is no clash, and I think we can get along without any problems, and I think that's the way forward.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I would like to, yes.
Not related to my point, but as a side point, I know that we've made a few jokes about some of the people that aren't here today, Tommy Robinson, Paul Golding, and Anne-Marie Waters, and just to kind of emphasize, we are joking. As human beings, we love them, we want the best for them, and we wish that at some point in time, when the probation and the police and a whole number of different groups allow them to, that they can debate and join us, and we can have that engagement, because that's why we came here today to do so.
Robinson will embrace Islam. Who knows?
Absolutely.
Maybe you're going to go Hajj one day.
Maybe you allow me to take communion as well. Yes. Okay, well, before I go to meet Anne-Marie at the kebab shop, I'd like to thank the panelists, the Reverend Frank Gelli. Thank you very much. Hamza Tzortzis, and also Abdullah Andalusi. I'd like to thank, on behalf of iERA, for having me here purely as the eye candy, and also extend a thank you to, even though they didn't turn up, for them trying to, or at least having their hearts in the right places too. Thank you to the audience and also for the staff here. Anything I've said to upset and offend, I deeply apologize, and I hope you can forgive me. I hope that we can also meet again under different circumstances with maybe more panelists and another controversial debate. That's all. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.